store's open. Well, yes, of course it's midnight. We're always open at midnight. Welcome to my repository of the occult, the macabre, the supernatural, and the arts that are inspired by them. Tonight we're going to visit a few treasures from my personal bookshelf with a bit of a twist to examine books not from the horror genre, but books on the horror genre. Books that ask the question, why do we like horror? Where does horror come from? What is horror? And who are the originators of this genre that we love so much? In this series, I'm going to construct a canon of must-have books for those of you who take your horror very seriously. My first books on horror were the horror cinema treasury books I used to check out from the library when I was a kid. These books gave a plot synopsis of various movies, showed stills from the movies themselves, and gave you behind-the-scenes facts. Before home video and cable TV, these books introduced me to movies that were never aired on television, like Nosferatu and Caligari. But after a while, I felt that these books never went beyond the fanboy status, and that horror films were condemned to be just a passionate hobby. These 6 books that I will share with you took horror and horror entertainment out of the realm of pastime and convinced me that horror can be uplifted to the level of serious academic study. The first book that took my passion for horror in this new direction was The Thrill of Fear, 250 Years of Scary Entertainment by Walter Kendrick. This book intrigued me with the question of why do we scare ourselves? Published in 1991, it traces the origins of horror back to the 1740s, with the Graveyard Poets, and then through Walpole's Castle of Otranto, and then to the latest Stephen King works at the time. It looks at the history of why we seek to scare and horrify ourselves during the last 2.5 centuries. This book fascinated me because it was the first to take horror as entertainment very seriously. This next book, The Philosophy of Horror, or Paradoxes of the Heart by Noel Carroll, is definitely a must-have book for any horror fan's bookshelf. Search any footnote or bibliography in any book on horror or horror entertainment, and this book would most likely be listed. It looks at the psychological and philosophical conundrum of how can we be attracted to something that scares, threatens, and repulses us. Carroll explains that it is not the actual horror events that entice us, but a graphic yet safe representation of that event that draws us, a term he coins as art horror. This term, art horror, is used to differentiate it from watching actual horror as those displayed in the Faces of Death series. You can even argue the point that the philosophy of horror takes the ideas from the thrill of fear and expands on it. This book should hold a special place of honor in any horror lover's bookshelf. The next book on this list is Monsters and Mad Scientists by Andrew Tudor. As a kid, I would have been scared off by this book's charts and tables, but these are the very things that make this book very essential. Tudor uses these charts to classify various horror subgenres by the threat, aka the monster. Is it supernatural or secular? Internal or external? Autonomous or dependent? By cross-referencing these criteria, the author gives us a workable tool for classification of subgenre. Plus, he goes on to show which subgenres were most popular during certain periods of film history. Planks of Reason, Essays on the Horror Film, is another must-have for any horror enthusiast. Edited by Barry Keith Grant, it's a collection of 2 categories of theses which examine horror films through genre studies, subgenres, aesthetics, conventions, iconographies, tropes and methods, and critiques. And also talks about the social impacts that horror has. So if you want another book that's serious about horror, it's not just fluff, definitely try to find a copy of this. They do have a new edition of this, but whatever you can get your hands on, be sure to get it. Next one is by far my favorite of all. It's The Monster Show by David J. Skal. Skal examines the zeitgeist of horror cinema during the 20th century. He points out how certain popular horror films were able to express the social anxieties and fears of its day. If you want to find out what worried or terrified the generation, look at the popular horror films at that time. Skal's narrative approach and plethora of knowledge has made him a bit of a celebrity on the subject. He has authored other titles and has even appeared on and produced several documentaries on horror. Last but not least, Overlooked Film Encyclopedia. This reference tool has compiled entries of every significant horror film, foreign and domestic, from 1886 to 1995. It is definitely the go-to book to use to get information on any film. Now, I know we can all just jump on our cell phones and search for them, but what makes this book essential is that it doubles as the ultimate horror movie shopping list. The research put into this book is amazing. It gives synopses, dates, names, locations, and other pertinent information about even the most obscure horror film made since the end of the 19th century. A couple of downsides about this book. First, it only covers movies up to 1995. Unfortunately, there was never a new volume to cover films up to the present day. My biggest hope is for the editors of this book to either publish a new edition or create an expansion volume to the original. The second downfall about this book is that the Overlook is very picky about what movies make the cut in regards to genre. I discovered that certain movies didn't appear on the list, and I wondered why, such as 1956's Godzilla. Later, I was to find out that Godzilla was classified as a sci-fi and appears in the Overlook's volume on science fiction. Despite whether you have reservations about this or not, the Overlook Film Encyclopedia Horror is the quintessential reference book on horror cinema. There are other essential books that I would recommend and will review in future episodes, but if I were teaching a course on this, these would be the starter texts that I would assign to you. Though these books tend to focus on horror cinema, they can also be applied to the field of art horror as well. Now, I will be creating future entries to this series as I expand on this canon, but I hope this first set of texts will help you to build your aesthetic on the subject of art horror. Personally, these particular works certainly incorporated my passion for art horror into the world of serious academic study. Most of these books can be found on Amazon, but also on websites such as Barnes & Noble's and The Strand. I provided links below. I'm interested in hearing your ideas and opinions, so post them on my page. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and keep that passion for horror alive, and continue watching our show, Midnight Shop of Shadows, as we explore other types of horror entertainment. And remember, we're always open